one of the definitions of wisdom is that one has to know the correct place of things, and then one can be wise because you have context and an understanding of where things are. Nowhere is this more relevant than in the way we're governed and who governs us and where they're taking us with that governance. Most of us think of governance simply in terms of the state and the country we live in. And of course, we adapt to the laws and the needs of that nation, and we try to be law-abiding citizens in that respect. But can those institutions, can those systems be trusted anymore? Because we've entered the 21st century, and it seems that there is a fundamental change in the way we live that is taking place, and it's actually being socially, politically engineered, and culturally engineered as well, I would argue. Is it all good, though? The Great Reset comes to mind, and the World Economic Forum as one institution that's tangibly pushing it, along with the United Nations and many, many of the states which are the most powerful in the world, all seem to be behind this notion of a Great Reset. Well, what is it? Because we need to know. Otherwise, where are we going to be taken? Where are we being led? Well, some of the concerns that have struck me when I look at this are the whole notion of techno-feudalism. This is also, it could be termed technocratic corporatocracy, and it could be in collusion with the state itself. And we're seeing increasing signs that the dependency on the state, the ideas of using AI and modern technology as ways of supposedly making life better for us, actually becoming things which could be quite dangerous for our health, for our psychology, for our family structures. There are so many bits of evidence which are emerging, which actually show that the likes of the World Economic Forum and their intent, and the UN as well for that matter, isn't necessarily in the favor of us ordinary citizens. And I think the more I'm researching this, these notions of carbon footprint surveillance systems, the ideas of universal basic income for compliant citizens, programmable central banking digital currency, and depopulation, the idea that there's too many of us. All of these are very concerning because in a practical way, when you look at the sustainable objectives which the UN has been pushing, it really does seem as though the carbon might well be us, and we are the problem in the eyes of those that are engineering policies around the world. Just one example, of course, is the pushing of radical assisted suicide. I've seen that going on. The breaking up of family, the underestimation of motherhood, the underestimation of fatherhood and its values, the underestimation of the traditional unit, fundamental unit actually, which has kept society basically functioning. Now, the reality is that I'm all for progress, and progress in terms of technology is part of our reality. But are we in control of that progress, or are forces which do not have the moral and the ethical realities that you and I might think are the same as them? Is that going to be a problem? I mean, this whole notion of virtue ethics and morality in terms of the way the world is going to be shaped does, to me, seem to be fundamentally different in terms of our traditional notion of virtue ethics and what the elitist rulers and the corporate powers seem to think it is. They seem to think that you can bend rules when it comes to profit and when it comes to power. This is where I think the clash of our future within the 21st century is already taking place. There is a resistance to all of this notion. There's also a compliance to the notions that the Agenda 2030 and the various corporate and state forces which are driving it seem to be facing. And that's a good thing. But, completely banning natural remedies, if you don't ban them, undermining them, that's already been in place for many, many years. And we're forced to accept that allopathic medicine is the only one that we should follow. There are other aspects, the whole idea of gender fluidity is extraordinarily worrying for many of us, because I can say that this morning I got up and I don't want to be a man, I could be a man above the navel and a woman below the navel. There are well over 50 gender realities that we're being, or illusions that we're being pushed to accept. Even the notion of defining what a woman has become a massive debate in many countries. And I find this all rather perplexing, and if I add to it the likes of Elon Musk pushing microchips, brain chips, and having the power and the ability to do it, or Bill Gates and his cohort buying up lots of land and being intent on genetically modified foods and pushing lab foods, driving against ordinary meat, for instance. These are all problematic issues. These are things that we should be discussing. These are things which our politicians should not be complying to because they favor the corporate profit scenario. They're things which the ordinary public should be informed about and should be part of. BlackRock, for instance, came into Britain less than a few months ago, met Keir Starmer and made some secret agreements. And before we know it, suddenly we find housing stock being bought up, all the low-level housing stock being bought up, and farmland also starting to disappear. So the commons going into the hands of corporate power is another red flag as far as I'm concerned. So, we've seen also that Gaza tells us that we can't trust institutions. Those institutions which we thought were there to protect international law seem to have failed. And is it a deliberate failure? Is it just hardwired within the system that they won't do what we all want them to do? Everybody wanted the mass murder of Palestinians to stop. Did we manage to do that? Not really. It's taken 2 years and we're still facing Israeli impunity on Gazans. So you can see that the UN failed in this. You can see that the major states in the world, the major powers, have failed us in this. We can talk about the World Health Organization, the atomic nuclear agencies as well. We could talk about a lot of the other institutions, the economic institutions, the World Trade Organization. All of them seem to have failed in their duties, and they seem to be continuing to fail, yet they also have an agenda which is about influencing people in politics, people in power, and driving them in a direction which suits them. How do we stop this? Even in democracies, it seems as though we're powerless to be able to really do anything. And the more we start demonstrating against these things, it seems now that they want to impose new laws to shut us up, to silence us, to arrest people. Again, the Palestinian cause has outed this fact where, 90-year-old vicars and blind old men are being picked up by the police, thrown into prison, or being prosecuted for being terrorists. I mean, what kind of ridiculous, nonsensical world have we arrived at when, supposedly socialist governments, or be they conservative governments, are okay with arresting their citizens simply for being vocal about stopping the mass murder of children? It's food for thought. I could go on, and I would really revisit most of these topics. I haven't touched even on, I think, the tip of the iceberg with this, but I think it's something that I want to put out there. How much are you aware of what is being planned for you? To what extent is there collusion within the international institutions? And to what extent are our politicians compromised by money coming from very powerful sources which make them comply with the wishes of those corporatocracies and ignore you and I, the citizen? Food for thought.